Welcome to Destined Love Stories, where stories of love and redemption unfold. Today, we dive into a millionaire's redemption, a journey of a wealthy man whose world of power and privilege crumbles under the gaze of a woman who values integrity over millions. Preston Caldwell, a dashing CFO, seeks solace in a quiet spa, only to meet Marianne Ellis, a masseuse whose strength lies not in wealth, but in her unshakable principles. What begins as a bold offer spirals into a clash of pride, jealousy, and ultimately love, a love that defies money's grasp. Will Preston uncover Marianne's secrets, or will her heart teach him what truly matters? Stick around to find out. Drop a comment. Where are you listening from? And if this tale captivates you, hit that subscribe button to never miss a story. Let's step into this world of passion and discovery together. The city pulsed with a restless energy, its skyline a jagged crown of glass and steel under the bruised purple of dusk. Preston Caldwell sat in the back seat of his sleek black Bentley, the leather cool against his tailored suit. At 38, he was a titan of finance, his jet black hair and piercing emerald eyes commanding boardrooms where millions shifted with a nod. But tonight, his chiseled jaw was tight, his fingers drumming an impatient rhythm on his knee. The weight of endless deals, whispered betrayals, and the hollow clink of champagne flutes had worn him thin. He craved escape, a fleeting moment where his name meant nothing. "Take me somewhere quiet," he said, his voice low, edged with exhaustion. "Somewhere no one knows me." His driver, a stoic man named Harold, glanced in the rearview mirror. "Sir?" "You heard me. Discreet, now." Preston's assistant, Ellen, perched beside Harold, scrolled through her tablet with practiced efficiency. "There's a place," she said, her tone cautious. "Lotus Haven Spa, tucked in the old district. Nothing flashy, but it's private. No paparazzi, no socialites. They say their therapists are exceptional." Preston's lips twitched, a ghost of a smirk. "Exceptional? Fine, get me there." 20 minutes later, the Bentley glided to a stop before a weathered building, its faded brick facade a stark contrast to the city's polished veneer. A hand-painted lotus flower adorned a wooden sign, its petals curling in quiet defiance of the urban sprawl. Preston stepped out, loosening his tie as the cool evening air brushed his skin. The street was silent, save for the distant hum of traffic, a rare pocket of stillness. Inside, the spa was a sanctuary of understated warmth. No gaudy chandeliers or overbearing incense, just soft lighting and the faint scent of lavender weaving through the air. A receptionist, Clara, greeted him with a smile that felt genuine, not rehearsed. Her graying hair was pulled into a neat bun, and her eyes crinkled with kindness. "Good evening, sir. Full body massage?" Preston nodded, his gaze sweeping the room. "Your best therapist, and I value privacy." "Of course," Clara said, unfazed. "Marianne's available. She's our most requested. Follow me." She led him down a narrow hall to a small room where candles flickered, casting golden shadows on bamboo walls. A massage table stood at the center, draped in crisp white linens. "Make yourself comfortable," Clara said, closing the door with a soft click. Preston shed his suit, the silk tie and starched shirt falling away like armor. In a plush robe, he lay face down on the table, the tension in his shoulders a map of battles fought in corporate towers. The door opened, and a voice, calm and melodic, broke the silence. "Good evening. I'm Marianne. May I begin?" He turned his head slightly, catching a glimpse of her. Marianne Ellis was a vision, her long raven hair cascading over her shoulders, framing a face of porcelain beauty. Her deep blue eyes held a quiet strength, and her presence seemed to still the air itself. She moved with grace, her hands deftly preparing oils, her expression one of serene focus. Preston, accustomed to commanding attention, felt an unfamiliar pull, curiosity that bordered on hunger. "Yes," he said, his voice softer than intended. "Go ahead." Her touch was a revelation, precise yet gentle. Her fingers found the knots in his muscles with an almost uncanny intuition, unraveling them with steady pressure. Each stroke seemed to peel away layers of stress, exposing a vulnerability he hadn't acknowledged in years. The room faded, leaving only the rhythm of her hands and the faint sound of his own breathing. For the first time in months, Preston felt seen. Not as a CFO, not as a power broker, but as a man. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked, the question slipping out unbidden. Her voice was steady, unhurried. "Long enough to know when a body carries more than physical weight." He chuckled, a low, surprised sound. "Is that your way of saying I'm a mess?" "It's my way of saying you need this," she replied, her tone warm but professional, her focus never wavering. The words landed like a soft blow. No one had spoken to him with such quiet authority, free of flattery or agenda. Her hands moved to his lower back, and a shiver ran through him. Not from cold, but from the rare sensation of being cared for without expectation. He stole another glance, noting the curve of her cheek, the way her lips pressed together in concentration. She was beautiful, yes, but it was her detachment, her refusal to be swayed by his presence, that hooked him. The session ended too soon. Marianne stepped back, washing her hands as he sat up, the robe slipping slightly. "Thank you," he said, testing her reaction. She only nodded, her smile polite but distant, already preparing to leave. The dismissal, subtle as it was, stung in a way he couldn't name. He dressed in silence, his mind racing. At the front desk, Clara processed his payment, her cheer undimmed. Preston leaned in, lowering his voice. "Marianne, she's single?" Clara's eyes twinkled, as if she'd heard the question before. "Oh, she's a mystery, that one. Very private. Never dated from what I know. Some say she's never been with anyone. Turns down every offer, no matter how charming." Preston's brow arched. "Every offer?" "Every one," Clara said, a hint of pride in her voice. "She's got her own code." He stepped into the night, the cool air sharp against his flushed skin. The Bentley waited, its engine a soft purr, but Preston lingered, glancing back at the Lotus sign. A virgin, possibly, in a world that devoured innocence. A woman who rejected advances with the ease of breathing. Marianne Ellis was no ordinary therapist. She was a challenge, a cipher wrapped in serenity. And Preston Caldwell, for all his wealth and power, was captivated. As Harold opened the car door, Preston's mind churned. He'd built empires by decoding complexities, by bending the world to his will. But this woman, with her steady hands and unshakable calm, was a puzzle he couldn't resist. He settled into the back seat, a slow smile spreading across his face. Tomorrow he'd return, not for a massage, but for answers. For her. The city woke with a restless hum, but Preston Caldwell was already restless, his mind tethered to the memory of Marianne Ellis. Her calm defiance, those piercing blue eyes, and the way her hands had unraveled his tension, lingered like a fever. He'd spent the night in his penthouse, the skyline glittering beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, unable to shake the image of her rejecting advances with a quiet strength no one in his world possessed. By dawn, his decision was made. He'd return to Lotus Haven Spa, not for solace, but to unravel her mystery. He strode into his office at 6 a.m., the glass-walled suite still dark, save for the glow of his desk lamp. His assistant, Ellen, was already there, sorting emails. "Cancel my morning," he said, his voice clipped. "I'm unavailable until noon." Ellen's brow furrowed. "Sir, the merger call with Tokyo." "Reschedule it," he snapped, grabbing his coat. "And don't call me unless the building's on fire." The Bentley purred through the city's waking streets, delivering him to the spa just as Clara flipped the open sign. The lotus sign seemed to glow in the morning light, a beacon pulling him in. Clara's warm smile greeted him. "Back so soon, Mr. Caldwell? Marianne's free if you're after her." "No one else," he said, his tone leaving no room for debate. Clara nodded, unfazed, and led him to the familiar candlelit room. The air was thick with lavender, but it did little to calm the storm brewing in his chest. He shed his suit, the silk tie and cufflinks discarded with a carelessness that betrayed his urgency. In the robe, he paced the small space, his pulse quickening at the thought of her. The door opened and Marianne stepped in, her raven hair tied loosely, her blue eyes as serene as before. "Good morning," she said, her voice a soft melody that both soothed and provoked him. "Ready to begin?" "Preston," he corrected, settling onto the table, his gaze locked on her. "Let's skip the formalities today." She nodded, her expression unchanged, and began preparing her oils. Her hands moved with the same precision, finding the tension in his shoulders as if she'd mapped it overnight. But Preston wasn't here for relief. He wanted her attention, her secrets, her. As her fingers pressed into his muscles, he broke the silence. "You're different, Marianne. You don't care who I am, do you?" Her hands didn't falter. "My job is to heal, not to care about titles." The answer was too smooth, too practiced. He pushed harder. "And if I want more than healing, what then?" Her fingers paused, just for a heartbeat before resuming. "I keep boundaries, Preston, even with interesting clients." "Interesting?" he smirked, turning his head to catch her eye. "So I'm interesting." "You're persistent," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. But her focus remained on her work. The room seemed to shrink, the air charged with unspoken challenges. Preston sat up, the robe slipping slightly, his voice low and deliberate. "Dinner tonight. Just you and me, no expectations." Her eyes met his, steady and unyielding. "No." The word landed like a slap, sharp and final. Preston's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of disbelief. No one said no to him. Not in boardrooms, not in bedrooms. He leaned closer, testing her resolve. "Everyone has a price, Marianne." Her gaze didn't waver. She stepped back, wiping her hands on a towel, her posture calm but resolute. "Not me." His jaw tightened. He reached into his blazer, draped over a chair, and pulled out a slim envelope. The paper was crisp, heavy with intent. He held it out, his voice a velvet challenge. $10 million. One night. Total privacy. No strings, no follow-ups. Marianne's expression hardened, her blue eyes flashing with something fiercer than anger, disappointment. She took the envelope, but instead of opening it, she placed it gently on the table beside him. "I've thought about it, Preston," she said, her voice steady as steel. "It's still no." He blinked, the rejection slicing through his confidence. "You're turning down $10 million? "I'm turning down the idea of selling my soul," she said, her words cutting deeper than he expected. "Money doesn't buy what I value." The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint flicker of candles. Preston stared at her, his mind racing. He'd closed billion-dollar deals with a handshake, bent rivals to his will with a glance. Yet this woman, in a modest spa room, had dismantled his power with a single word. He lay back, his pride bruised but his fascination ablaze. "You're serious," he said, almost to himself. "I am," she replied, resuming the massage with a touch that felt both gentle and unyielding. Her hands worked his shoulders, but the tension in the room was no longer physical. It was a battle of wills, and for the first time, Preston wasn't sure he'd win. As she moved to his lower back, he tried again, softer this time. Why? Why say no to something that could change your life? My life doesn't need changing, she said, her voice quieter now, almost kind. Not like that. He wanted to argue, to press, but her words carried a weight that silenced him. She wasn't just rejecting his money. She was rejecting the version of him that thought money could buy everything. The realization stung, but it also sparked something new: respect. He'd never met anyone who could stand so firmly in their truth, untouched by the allure of wealth. The session ended, and Marianne stepped away, washing her hands as if nothing had happened. Preston dressed slowly, his eyes never leaving her. She was a fortress, her calm exterior hiding depths he was desperate to explore. At the door, he paused, turning to her. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low, a promise as much as a challenge. She met his gaze, unflinching. "That's up to you." He left the room, the envelope still on the table, its contents untouched. Outside, the city roared back to life, but Preston felt a shift within him. Marianne Ellis wasn't just a puzzle, she was a mirror, reflecting a man he barely recognized. As he slid into the Bentley, a slow smile spread across his face. He'd be back, not to buy her, but to understand her. And maybe, just maybe, to find himself in the process. The dawn broke over the city with a cruel clarity, its light exposing the cracks in Preston Caldwell's carefully constructed world. The sting of Marianne Ellis's rejection, her refusal of $10 million, and the audacity of her calm defiance had kept him awake. His penthouse a cage of glass and shadows. Her words, "I'm turning down the idea of selling my soul," echoed like a verdict, stripping away the armor of his wealth. No one had ever said no to him, not in the boardrooms where empires bowed, nor in the fleeting liaisons that filled his nights. Yet Marianne, a mere masseuse, had done so with a quiet strength that both infuriated and enthralled him. By sunrise, his pride was a raw wound and he was determined to reclaim control. He arrived at Lotus Haven Spa before its doors opened, the hand-painted lotus sign a taunting reminder of his defeat. The city was still stirring, but Preston's resolve was razor-sharp. He'd confront her, demand answers, and unravel the mystery of her unshakable resolve. Clara, the receptionist, looked up with a flicker of surprise as he strode in, his tailored coat billowing like a storm cloud. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her warmth tinged with caution. "Early today. Marianne's not in yet, but—" "I'll wait," he cut in, his voice a low growl. He settled into a wicker chair in the lobby, his green eyes fixed on the door, his fingers tapping an impatient rhythm. The lavender-scented air did nothing to soothe the fire in his chest. Minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of the clock fueling his agitation. When Marianne finally appeared, her raven hair loose and her blue eyes serene, his pulse surged. She paused, sensing his intensity, but her expression remained composed. "Preston," she said, nodding toward the massage room. "This way." The candlelit room felt smaller today, the air thick with unspoken tension. Preston didn't bother with the robe, standing in his suit as Marianne prepared her oils. "I need an explanation," he said, his voice sharp, cutting through the silence. "Why did you turn me down?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "I told you, I don't sell myself." "That's not an answer," he snapped, stepping closer. $10 million, Marianne. No one says no to that. No one. Her hands stilled, her blue eyes piercing his. "I did, and I meant it." His temper flared, the rejection a fresh wound. "You think you're better than me? That your principles make you untouchable?" He loomed over her, his presence commanding, but she didn't recoil. "Everyone has a price. Name yours." "Nothing," she said, her voice steady as stone. Not everything is for sale, Preston. The words hit like a slap, his pride buckling under their weight. He paced the room, his hands clenching. "You're making a mistake," he said, his tone darkening. "You don't know who I am. I could buy this spa, fire you, ruin you." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but her calm held. "And you don't know who I am. Maybe that's what scares you." The accusation stopped him cold, his breath catching. Scared. Him. The man who'd crushed rivals and built fortunes. Yet her words burrowed deep, exposing a truth he couldn't face. He leaned in, his voice a dangerous whisper. "You'll regret this, Marianne. You have no idea what I'm capable of." She crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. "I think I do, and I'm still here." The standoff was electric, the room crackling with their clashing wills. Preston's frustration boiled over, and he stormed toward the door, slamming it behind him. The sound echoed through the lobby, drawing gasps from Clara and a young employee, who fumbled with her phone, capturing the moment. Preston didn't notice, his vision clouded by rage as he pushed through the glass doors and into the waiting Bentley. "Drive," he barked, sinking into the leather, his heart pounding with a mix of fury and fascination. By noon, his world unraveled further. His assistant, Ellen, called, her voice tight with panic. "Sir, there's a video online. It's you leaving the spa. It's gone viral. 100,000 views already." Preston's phone buzzed with alerts, each one a dagger. He opened the link, and there it was. His furious exit, captioned, "Millionaire CFO shot down by Masseuse." The comments were merciless. "Money can't buy class." "She humbled him in seconds. What a loser." His face burned, the public humiliation a wound deeper than any deal gone sour. The world saw him as a fool, a rich man brought low by a woman who wouldn't bend. He hurled his phone across the office, the glass screen shattering against the wall. His empire, his reputation is now mocked on screens across the city. All because of her. Marianne Ellis, with her serene defiance, had turned his power into a punchline. He called his investigator, a grizzled man named Vince, his voice cold as ice. "Find everything on Marianne Ellis, her past, her secrets, her weaknesses. I want it all. Now." Vince's reply was measured. "She's a ghost, sir. Barely any records. But I'll dig. Anything specific?" "Everything," Preston said, his eyes narrowing. "She's hiding something, I know it." As Vince hung up, Preston leaned back, staring at the city beyond his office windows. The skyline, once a testament to his dominance, now felt like a cage. Marianne wasn't just a challenge. She was a mirror, reflecting a man he didn't recognize. A man who'd lost control, not just of her, but of himself. His pride demanded retribution, but a deeper part of him, buried beneath the anger, craved something else. Her respect, her truth. He stood, grabbing his coat. The video had exposed him, but it also lit a fire. He'd uncover her secrets, not to destroy her, but to understand her, to prove he was more than the man she'd rejected. As he stepped into the elevator, a plan took shape. He'd return to the spa, not with threats, but with patience. Marianne Ellis had won this round, but the game was far from over. And Preston Caldwell never lost twice. The city's pulse throbbed beneath a sky of molten gold, but Preston Caldwell's world was a storm of his own making. The viral video of his humiliated exit from Lotus Haven Spa had spread like wildfire. Its mocking captions, "CFO crushed by Masseuse," etched into his mind. Each notification was a fresh cut to his pride, transforming his name into a punchline across boardrooms and social feeds. Marianne Ellis, with her serene defiance and unshakable principles, had not only rejected his $10 million offer, but had unwittingly turned him into a spectacle. Yet, beneath the fury, A deeper hunger gnawed at him. To unravel her, to understand the woman who dared to say no. His investigator, Vince, had delivered a frustratingly thin file. Marianne Ellis, 32. A ghost with no digital footprint, no past beyond a high school diploma, and 3 years at the spa. But one item burned in Preston's memory. A faded photo of Marianne, radiant, beside a sharply dressed man outside an office building, captioned, "With my favorite person." The man was Julian Ellis, Lotus Haven's millionaire owner, and the sight of them together sparked a new emotion: envy. Preston's obsession deepened. Who was Julian to her? A mentor? A lover? The ambiguity fueled a possessive urge to claim Marianne, to eclipse whoever held her loyalty. Vince's report hinted at a deeper connection but lacked specifics, only noting Julian's wealth and his discreet investments in wellness ventures. Determined to confront the mystery head-on, Preston accepted an invitation to a charity gala at the opulent Grand Meridian Hotel, a glittering stage where the city's elite flaunted their power. If Marianne was tied to Julian, she might appear at such an event, and he'd seize the chance to assert his presence. The gala was a dazzling affair, chandeliers casting prisms of light over black-tie guests sipping champagne. Preston, in a tailored tuxedo, his black hair gleaming, moved through the crowd with practiced charm. But his eyes scanned relentlessly. Then, he saw her. Marianne stood across the ballroom, a vision in a sapphire gown that hugged her curves, her raven hair cascading in soft waves. She laughed, her hand resting lightly on the arm of a tall man in a charcoal suit, Julian Ellis. Their ease, the way her smile brightened for him, sent a jolt of jealousy through Preston's veins. His grip tightened on his glass, the crystal nearly cracking. She was his enigma, not Julian's. He crossed the room, his stride purposeful, his smile a calculated mask. "Marianne," he said, his voice smooth but laced with possession. "Didn't expect to see you here." Her laughter faded, her blue eyes narrowing as she registered his tone. "Preston," she said, her voice cool, stepping slightly away from Julian. "This is Julian Ellis." Julian extended a hand, his hazel eyes twinkling with amusement. "Her brother," he said, his grip firm. "And you are?" Preston's face flushed, the jealousy dissolving into a mix of relief and embarrassment. "Preston Caldwell," he said, recovering quickly. "I've heard Marianne mention someone special." The lie slipped out effortlessly, a gambit to gauge her reaction. Julian's grin widened. "Oh, she's told me about a persistent guy." "That you, Caldwell?" Marianne's cheeks pinked, her composure faltering for the first time. "Julian," she murmured, shooting him a look. Preston's heart leapt. She'd talked about him. The revelation was a spark, igniting a new resolve. He leaned closer, his voice low. "Marianne, can we talk? Alone?" She hesitated, her eyes searching his but nodded. 5 minutes. Julian raised an eyebrow but stepped back, joining a nearby group. Preston led her through a side door to a secluded balcony, the city's lights sprawling below like a sea of stars. The cool night air did little to temper the heat in his chest. He faced her, his usual confidence shaken by her proximity, the sapphire gown accentuating her elegance. "I owe you an apology," he began, his voice softer than he intended. "That $10 million offer was crass. I thought I could impress you, but I insulted you." "I'm sorry." Marianne studied him, her guard still up, her blue eyes piercing through his facade. "Why does it matter, Preston? You could have anyone." He stepped closer, the space between them charged. "Because you're not just anyone. You saw through me, my money, my title, and you didn't flinch. No one's ever done that." His words hung in the air, raw and unguarded, a confession he hadn't planned. Her expression softened, a flicker of curiosity replacing her wariness. "I don't care about your wealth," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I care about who you are when the world isn't watching." The sincerity in her words disarmed him, peeling back layers he'd long buried. For a moment, they stood in silence, the city's hum a distant pulse. Then, impulsively, Marianne leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to his cheek. The warmth of her lips sent a shock through him, unraveling his restraint. Unable to stop himself, he cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her jaw, and kissed her lips, a slow, searing kiss that felt like a vow. Her breath hitched, but she didn't pull away, her hands resting lightly on his chest. When they parted, her eyes sparkled with surprise, a flush coloring her cheeks. "I didn't expect that," she whispered, a smile tugging at her lips. "Neither did I," he said, grinning, his heart pounding. "But I want more. Dinner tomorrow? No envelopes, no deals, just us." She hesitated, then nodded, her smile tentative but genuine. "Just us." As they returned to the ballroom, Julian's knowing glance met them, but Preston barely noticed. The envy that had driven him was gone, replaced by a fragile hope. Marianne wasn't Julian's. She was her own, and she'd chosen to step closer to him. The gala's glamour faded, the crowd a blur. All that mattered was her, and the promise of a tomorrow where he might prove himself worthy of her trust. The Grand Meridian's ballroom glittered like a constellation, but for Preston Caldwell, the world had narrowed to the aftertaste of Marianne Ellis's kiss. On the balcony, under a canopy of stars, her lips had met his. First a tender brush on his cheek, then a searing connection that unraveled his defenses. Her words, "I don't care about your wealth," echoed in his chest, a lifeline pulling him from the wreckage of his pride. The viral video, the mocking headlines, the $10 million offer, all faded against the promise of her tentative smile. "Dinner tomorrow? Just us," he'd asked, and her nod, soft but certain, had set his heart ablaze. As they re-entered the gala, Julian's knowing glance sparked a flicker of triumph in Preston. But it was Marianne's hand brushing his arm that anchored him. She'd chosen to step closer, and he was determined to prove he deserved it. The next evening, Preston stood outside a quiet bistro, tucked away from the city's clamor, his usual tailored suit replaced by a simple blazer and slacks. No Bentley tonight. He'd driven himself, craving the normalcy Marianne seemed to embody. The bistro's warm lights spilled onto the cobblestone street, and when she arrived, his breath caught. Her black hair was loose, framing her porcelain face, and her emerald dress hugged her curves with understated elegance. "You're early," she said, her blue eyes twinkling with amusement. "Couldn't wait," he admitted, holding the door. Inside, they settled at a corner table, the hum of conversation and clink of glasses, a soft backdrop. Over candlelight and shared plates of pasta, Preston found himself disarmed by her ease. She spoke of small joys, sketching in her rare free moments the scent of rain on city streets. And he hung on every word, marveling at her ability to find beauty in the ordinary. "You're not what I expected," he said, leaning forward. "Most people in my world chase status. You're real." Marianne's smile was wry. "Your world sounds exhausting. I'd rather live in mine, where a good day means helping someone breathe easier." Her honesty pierced him, a reminder of the emptiness he'd masked with wealth. He reached for her hand, his thumb grazing her knuckles. "Tell me about your world, then," she hesitated, her gaze dropping to their joined hands. "It hasn't always been simple," she said, her voice quieter. "Julian and I lost our parents when I was 16. Car accident. He was 20, barely an adult, but he stepped up. Paid for my art history degree, kept us together. When I burned out on academics, he opened Lotus Haven, gave me a place to heal by helping others." Her eyes met his, raw with vulnerability. "That's why I don't bend, Preston. I've rebuilt myself once. I won't let anyone take that away." Her confession cracked something open in him. He'd spent years building walls, equating vulnerability with weakness. But her strength in sharing her pain was a revelation. "I've never had that," he said, his voice low. "Family, I mean. My parents were more interested in their portfolios than in me. I learned early that money buys control, not connection. Until you." The admission slipped out, unguarded, and her fingers tightened around his. "You're more than your money, Preston," she said, her gaze steady. "But you have to believe that too." The words landed like a challenge, stirring a resolve he hadn't known he possessed. They lingered over dessert, trading stories of forgotten dreams, his boyhood wish to sail the world, her love for painting landscapes she'd never seen. When they stepped into the cool night, he walked her to her car, the city's pulse a distant hum. "I don't want this to end," he said, stopping under a street lamp. Her smile was soft, and before he could overthink it, he kissed her again, slower this time, savoring the warmth of her lips. She leaned into him, her hands on his chest, and the world fell away. Their dates became a rhythm. Quiet dinners, walks through hidden parks, moments where titles and wealth dissolved. Each encounter peeled back layers, revealing a Marianne who laughed freely at his dry humor and a Preston who listened without agenda. One night, in a rooftop garden strung with fairy lights, he opened up further. "I've been lonely," he admitted, staring at the city below. "Surrounded by people, but no one sees me. You do." She touched his cheek, her eyes fierce. "Because you let me. That's not weakness, Preston, it's courage." Her words were a balm, healing wounds he hadn't named. He kissed her fiercely, the intensity a promise to be the man she saw. Weeks turned to months, their bond deepening with every shared vulnerability. Preston learned to savor her world, helping her sketch at dawn, joining her at Lotus Haven to carry supplies, feeling useful in ways his boardroom never allowed. Marianne, in turn, stepped into his, attending a low-key charity event on his arm, her grace outshining the elite. Julian, ever protective, watched with approval, confiding to Preston one evening, "She's tough, but her heart's soft. Don't break it." "I won't," Preston vowed, the weight of his promise grounding him. 6 months after that first kiss, he stood in a candlelit garden, a velvet box in his pocket. Marianne arrived, radiant in a silver dress, unaware of his plan. Under an arch of roses, he knelt, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "You taught me love isn't bought, it's earned. You're my truth, my home. Marry me, Marianne." Tears shimmered in her eyes as she whispered, "Yes." The ring, a simple sapphire, slid onto her finger, sealing a bond forged in defiance of his past. As they embraced, the garden seemed to glow, a testament to a love that had bound them beyond wealth's reach. The path to their wedding lay ahead, but in that moment, Preston knew. Marianne was his forever, and he was finally whole. The garden where Preston Caldwell proposed to Marianne Ellis lingered in his memory like a sacred vow, its rose-laden arch and her tearful yes, a beacon in the chaos of his once empty life. The sapphire ring on her finger, chosen for the way it mirrored her blue eyes, was more than a promise. It was a defiance of the world he'd once ruled, where wealth bought everything but meaning. 6 months had passed since their first kiss on that starlit balcony, and their love had woven a tapestry of quiet moments. Stolen dinners, her sketches at dawn, his hand steadying hers as they navigated his world of glittering elites. Marianne had taught him to see beyond the ledger of power, and he, in turn, had given her a safe harbor to share her guarded heart. Now, as their wedding day loomed, Preston felt a new tension. not of doubt, but of the weight of a future he wanted to build right. The Grand Meridian Hotel, where their story had shifted with a single kiss, was transformed for their wedding. Its sprawling estate glowed under a late summer sky, chandeliers casting prisms over a sea of white roses and silk-draped tables. Preston stood in a private suite, adjusting his black tie, his reflection, a man reborn. The tailored tuxedo hugged his frame, his jet-black hair sleek, but it was the warmth in his green eyes that marked the change. Julian Ellis, Marianne's brother, and now his confidant, clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Nervous, Caldwell?" he asked, his hazel eyes glinting with mischief. "Terrified," Preston admitted, a wry smile breaking through. "Not of her, but of screwing this up. She deserves everything." Julian nodded, his usual levity softening. "She does. And you're the first guy I've seen who gets that. Don't let her down." The words settled like a charge, and Preston squared his shoulders, ready to meet his bride. The ceremony was set in the estate's garden, where a canopy of fairy lights mimicked the stars of their first kiss. Guests, friends, a few trusted colleagues, and Lotus Haven's staff filled the rows, their murmurs a soft hum. Clara, the spa's receptionist, dabbed her eyes, whispering to a colleague, "Never thought I'd see Marianne like this." Preston took his place at the altar, his heart pounding as the string quartet began a gentle melody. Then, Marianne appeared and the world stilled. Her ivory gown flowed like liquid moonlight, delicate lace tracing her shoulders, her raven hair swept into a loose chignon adorned with pearls. She walked alone, her choice, a nod to the strength that had carried her through loss and rebuilding. Julian stood at the front, his smile proud, giving her away in spirit. Marianne's blue eyes locked on Preston's, and the vulnerability in her gaze, tempered by fierce love, stole his breath. She reached him, and he took her hands, their warmth grounding him. The officiant's words were a soft cadence, but Preston barely heard them, lost in her. When it came time for vows, he spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion clawing at his throat. "Marianne, you saw me when I was blind, blind to what matters, blind to myself. You taught me that love isn't a transaction, but a choice to be better every day. I promise to choose you, to build with you, to hold you through every storm. You're my truth, my home, and I'll spend my life proving I'm worthy of you." Tears shimmered in her eyes, and her voice, when she spoke, was clear, resonant. "Preston, you showed me that strength isn't in standing alone, but in trusting someone to stand beside you. You saw my scars and called them beautiful, gave me courage to love without fear. I promise to be your partner, your sanctuary, to remind you who you are when the world tries to forget. I love you, not for what you have, but for who you choose to be." The guests sighed, some wiping tears. But Preston and Marianne existed only for each other. He slid a gold band beside her sapphire ring, and she placed one on his finger, their hands trembling with the weight of forever. The officiant pronounced them married, and Preston kissed her, a deep, unhurried kiss that sealed their vows, her lips soft and certain against his. The crowd erupted in applause, rose petals raining down as they pulled apart, her smile brighter than the sun. The reception was a whirl of elegance and joy. Under a tent strung with lanterns, guests danced to a live band, their laughter mingling with the clink of champagne flutes. Julian's toast was heartfelt, his voice breaking as he said, "Marianne's always been my hero. Preston, you're her match, and I'm proud to call you family." Preston raised his glass, his arm around Marianne, feeling a belonging he'd never known. As they danced, her head resting against his chest, he whispered, "You've changed me, Marianne. I was lost until you." She looked up, her eyes fierce with love. "And you found me, Preston. We're home now, Later, they slipped away to a quiet corner of the garden, the party's hum fading. Under the fairy lights, he held her close, her gown brushing his shoes. "What's next for us?" she asked, her voice soft. "Everything," he said, kissing her forehead. "A life where we build, not buy. Maybe a house with a garden for your sketches. A place for us to be." "Us," she smiled, tracing his jaw. "And you'll still come to the spa, carry my supplies?" "Always," he laughed, pulling her into another kiss, the promise of their future woven into every touch. The night ended with them driving away, her hand in his. The city lights a backdrop to their new beginning. Preston Caldwell, once a king of wealth, had found his true empire in her love. A vow of forever that no fortune could rival. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey through a millionaire's redemption. We hope Preston and Marianne's story of love, integrity, and transformation touched your heart. What did you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did their vows move you? Or what moment stayed with you? Share where you're listening from, and let's keep the conversation going. Your support means the world. So hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more stories that inspire. Until next time, thank you for being part of our storytelling family, and we can't wait to share another tale with you soon.